Hey guys, in this first video for conversion, I'm going to do something a little differently than I usually do. I'm actually often going to not go too deep. My understanding of conversion is quite deep, but I want to give you a somewhat non-deep summary and framework for how to do conversion. And this is going to be fairly unique material. Of course, some things I'll say might have been said somewhere else, but this isn't going to be the somewhat typical rehashing of Robert Cialdini's Influence or Claude Hopkins' Scientific Advertising. I believe I have those titles right, or whatever else. But one good thing about the framework I'll give you here is that it will help you to use some of the more sort of random shotgun advice that you like, shotgun, like kind of scattershot advice that you'll get from other places, including it'll help you to use, we give you a number of templates. Mike's done a number of interviews with people who have products as part of the launch jacking and so forth in the monetization section in Project X. And we also have the red carpet conversion section in Project X. It's all very valid. I've helped work on that, and Mike has, and Mike's terrific, of course. But this is going to give you a framework that's going to likely help you tremendously when it comes to conversion. I'm also not going to really pause in this video and tell you why I'm qualified. But I think as we go on, you're going to understand that I know what I'm talking about. Later on, I can discuss things more somewhat randomly and talk a little bit about my past things that I've done and that you can learn from and so forth. But here, I just want to go through the framework. Okay, I switched to the next slide here. And I want to quickly cover how, in my terminology, the difference between conversion and sales, they're basically synonyms, except we can think of making a sale as a bit more of a shallow plan that is event that's not very long without really full thinking involved, and you're just looking for one event to happen. And it's more of a conversion in the way that I'm using it is a little bit more of a full thought out, planned ahead, a little bit more or a little bit or a lot more long-term type of action. Or not process, but I'll give you an example. Project X, for example, we don't offer refunds. We also are careful about making it clear that the payment plan is a payment plan, and as opposed to buying a refrigerator, we even say, as opposed to a subscription that can be canceled. So and then now in order to make a sale when you give no refunds and you make it a payment plan, not a subscription, then you're hitting a higher threshold that we had to hit for you to say yes. So it was more of a conversion. A sale could have been, oh yeah, we'll give you a refund. We're wishy-washy about it, about everything. And because we just want to hear good feedback. We want to get over one hurdle and that's it. And we're not really looking past that. So that's an easier benchmark is to make a sale because it's a shallow type of thing. Instead, we went for a deeper sort of conversion. And that is something we do constantly. And I do constantly where we'll get upsell percentages. An upsell is after someone buys one product, buying the next one. Now, in the case of Project X, it's our only product right now, so there's no upsell. But when we've done upsells, we will hit well over 50% of the people that buy the first will buy the second, which is absolutely outrageous and unheard of. It's totally atypical. And there's ways that we do that. But that's another example of what I mean by conversion. Generally, people only think in terms of sales because they're scared. They don't really know what they're doing when it comes to conversion. They might even be good at it in a sense and be successful with conversion. There's plenty of people who have businesses and make sales and convert, but they don't really quite know how they did it. And so they're a little scared when they're doing it and when they don't have a clear framework and process. And let me point out here, just to see the benefit of thinking through conversion a little bit more thoroughly than just trying to make a sale. There's at least three. There might be others that I'm not thinking of, but there's three drawbacks in the short term, midterm, long term. Basically, after the sale, there's at least three drawbacks to offering refund for Project X and for plenty of other products as well. One drawback would be that the customers who don't refund end up essentially paying more, right? They're paying for the people that do. So our better customers are paying for our worst customers, paying more because of people that are refunding. Is one drawback. Another drawback is that we need to keep on selling after somebody purchases. And that distracts us from being able to focus on teaching. So our focus and motivation would be split. And Greg's and so forth, and Fletch and Mike, a little bit like if a president doesn't convert when he wins, if he just makes the sale and wins the presidency, but there's no quote unquote mandate or there was no clear message of what he would do, then he might spend the rest of his term eating still rather than doing anything useful. Now, of course, if they have terrible policies, maybe you'd rather they campaign than do anything quote unquote useful. But you understand what I mean. So we don't want to have an ongoing campaign when we're trying to help you and teach you and give you what you need. It's much easier for us to focus. And they're two different things. Trying to keep up the make a kind of ongoing sale of having you not refund would genuinely be distracting. I have a lot of experience with this, and it really detracts from the ability to actually teach people properly. So that'll be a second drawback. And a third would be a sort of like burnout and negative situation that would happen with Greg, with Mike answering emails and so forth, where the typical situation with sort of gurus and so forth in our niche is that they don't like their customers and they run away from their customers. They're afraid of their customers and so forth. Behind the scenes when they're talking, it's pretty clear that's how they feel in most cases. And we don't have that because people that are our customers, they've agreed to no refunds up front. And so we really appreciate that. We take that seriously, right? You've made it clear that you're serious in a different way than people normally do. And that's great. And so it starts our relationship on this much nicer footing. So those are the benefits. And so in order to do that, and I'm in essence in charge of conversion with OMG, Mike ends up doing a lot of the front work for it, and he's great at it, and he absolutely does conversion and crushes with it. But ultimately, it's my responsibility. I do a lot of the scripts and a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you don't see. And so just to speak in a vacuum, not really referring to my partners one way or the other, since I'm the one making this video for you, I had to make sure you are converted in a different way than just making the sale in order to get us ready to win before we start, where we're over the refund situation. Okay. And then another thing that you might that we want to convert you for, and not just make the sale, not just get you to make the first payment or spend money and say, yeah, I bought, but we want you to be ready to consume the product. There's a general idea among people that sell information or teach that the students don't really care about or won't even really open the book or watch the videos. And we don't have that attitude at all. We expect people to watch the stuff, but a lot of that is how we do our original conversion process, is we're not just converting for the sale, but we're converting for consumption, and we're converting within as much as we can do in the initial sales process or conversion process. We're converting for success as well, right up front in the actual sales process before you even get started with the training. Then this is all built into the conversion as well, as best as I can. And I could totally try to make the sale in a different way where I was just trying to get people to buy. But instead I go for all this as well. And we're wildly successful despite these sort of quote unquote obstacles. But then I'm not trying to create obstacles. It's just we end up being far better off by doing it this way. So it's something to keep in mind as we continue forward here. Okay, here's our main slide. And then what I'm going to do is put each of these 4 lines on their own slide and explain them and show you examples and elaborate on what I mean. But there's 4 things that are going to form your entire framework for conversion. And then it's just a matter of understanding each of these better. But this is your framework. This is, in a overly simplistic way of saying, I guess, all you need to know. But this is all the framework you need. And then you can fill it in more and more. The more you fill in with understanding and details, the better you'll be at conversion. But it's a very nice confidence building and competence building thing to have the proper framework. And that's what you're getting right now. Forevermore, for the rest of your life, you will have the proper framework. You'll be on the right playing field to make sales, which is a tremendous thing in life to be able to do. And this won't just be for online business. You can use this any time when you are doing any sort of conversion, including if you have a religion that you want to move people towards, or if you want to either build or maintain a relationship in a certain way and at a certain level and so forth. It's all a similar process. All right. So the first thing, and this is a bit of an amateur mistake. I made it plenty before I realized I've been doing this for 20 years. Since my 4th year in college, I've been supporting myself basically through sales that I make, direct sales that I make. And interestingly enough, for basically a product that either I make or I'm in a joint venture with, not really where I'm selling someone else's product. I haven't been selling cars or this or that. I've been doing basically what I'm doing now. It's my own business and my own product as well. I have not always been the product creator, although much of the time I have been. All right. So the first thing is the benefit. And I put benefit/solution must be immediately clear. It's a very easy mistake to make. People might think that instead you want to gain attention. When I first taught, my first thing that I did to make money, I did it for about 10 years, was teaching accelerated learning. And I did it on the campus of University of Virginia, where I had gone to school, or where I was still going to school. I started in my last year of college there. And I put up flyers and I held information sessions, which are basically sales presentations. And then I was able to get a classroom on campus to do it. I wasn't affiliated with the university, but I just taught privately on the grounds there. Sometimes I put up flyers and I would try to be clever or get attention. And that, interestingly enough, wouldn't be effective. What was effective, sure, you want to get people's attention, but essentially you don't want to sacrifice being clear about the benefit that you're providing or the solution to a problem that people are looking for and that sort of thing. So in that case, it was like cut your study time in half, right? Teaching how to read faster and do other things regarding accelerated learning. So either cut your study time in half or read 3 to 5 times faster, okay, and memorize better, something like that. Those are essentially the two headlines that constantly worked. And whenever I deviated from that and put something that wasn't very clear, or was clever, or this, if I said, this really works, or something like that, or if I don't even know, I don't think I'd personally tried this, but I'm quite certain that if I might have even tried it once, if I put something like be sexier or sex, right, which is an attention getter on college, but it converted worse. Okay. It didn't get people to the information session, sales presentation, nearly as well as just being clear. I tend to come up with most subject headlines that go in emails and a lot of the framing of things and the seed material, the general content. And when I come up with the headlines, by far the first thing I'm looking to do is be clear. I'm not looking to be clever as my first thing. And this is particularly helpful for people that have less experience with conversion. Just start out. There's a lot of people, interestingly enough, especially if you hit these other things decently, especially these two, are going to purchase your product if you get it in front of people. If you just tell them what it is, or they'll buy the affiliate offer. If you just get them over there, right? At least by your baseline should be getting those people that know what they want and they want to buy something. So go for the clarity, not cleverness. And I'll explain more on another slide. All right, now I put in a way that stands alone. And what this takes care of is you want at least one thing, a few things. When I was teaching my accelerated learning course, I was the only guy doing it on campus. So it was super easy in that sense. I still had to, it wasn't easy to make sales for plenty of other reasons, but people had to want to pay for a course that was just private that didn't give them a degree or anything in the first place and so forth, which were problems. But one thing that I had, it was easy to stand alone because I was the only guy offering it. And sometimes that'll be the case, right? And so if your offer is just unique in that space, and it wouldn't matter if someone else is offering it somewhere else on a different university, on that university, I was the only guy. If I wasn't, then I would need to stand alone in some other way. You could stand apart, by the way, just in time. You could give someone the same offer that they've seen, but if you're offering it at a different time, right? Just if someone comes out with a movie that they want to come out on a week when there's not too many other major movies playing. It doesn't matter if there was a blockbuster that came out a couple of weeks ago. What mainly matters is whether it's coming out that weekend, right? Debuting. And so you can stand alone a bit in time, where if you're the only offer that someone's seeing in some time period that is enough to distinguish it from others, and depending on the niche and the industry, then you're okay there. So you can just be alone in space and time, and I'll elaborate on that some more. Otherwise, you obviously want what's called a unique selling proposition, but just having something that stands out. You can be mediocre in most any other way, and then I'll get to that and then this line. See, you can, with what you want to do, you want to stand out in some way, and I'll cover that more in depth in the slide for this one. Then you want to make sure you don't have things that disqualify you. The appearance of the incompetence, dishonesty, unlikability in various ways. You don't want to be below like a 4, maybe a 3, often a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 in various categories, right? If you had a restaurant, I know no one has a restaurant here. I'm just saying, for example, to see what I mean. Or of course you can apply this to a website where you don't want most everything about your restaurant can be just a 4 or a 5. If you have one thing that stands out that people like and want. It's a mistake to think that you need to stand out in more than one area. It's also a big mistake to try to be like a 9 or a 10 or 8 or 9 or 10 in 2 areas and think that makes up for being a 2, a 1 or 2 or 3 other areas. You'd much rather be like a 9 in one area and a 4 in like every other area than be like have 3 9s and 3 2s, right? Because once you're disqualified, that's it. It doesn't matter how many 9s or 10s you have, if that makes sense. So that's key. And then finally, once you have just this in place, you want to be clear about either a benefit or a solution to a problem. Sometimes people will say the benefit within the benefit, you sell feelings, whatever. The point is that the person that's the prospective customer, they need to immediately recognize that this is something that they potentially want for whatever reason, either because they know they have a problem and you're providing the solution in a clear way, or because you're providing a benefit that they already know will solve a problem of theirs or help them take advantage of an opportunity they really want, or you're hitting an emotional button that they connect to a more logical benefit that provides a solution. But one way or the other, some sort of thing that's clear than what they want. Okay, we can get, again, you can get more and more into this, understand it more and more, but I just want you to understand basically what I'm saying here. Right. Then you stand alone. That's why, instead of saying stand out, that's why I put stand alone, because I didn't really exactly have to stand out when I was doing accelerated learning. Since that time, I've done plenty of sales and products where I did have to stand out in a different way because there were other people. Obviously, with OMG machines, there's other people selling advice and training on how to make money online. And so in that case, it's not as simple as on campus, but I put when I was the only person teaching speed reading. But standing alone is more correct, more clear, because you don't need to stand out if you're the only guy there, and that happens sometimes. Or if you're the only guy that's just in the particular space that you're in, right? If you're in like I don't know, some kind of niche community or forum, and you're the only person with your service on a forum, then you don't need to stand out from people that aren't in that space, right? You just need to sit you're standing alone. All right, don't want to be disqualified. So once you've taken care of these things, then it's a matter of frame and context. And this is where people say, tell a story. People say problem, agitate, solve. Where in a sales letter, you first make people feel more aware of a problem, and then you make them feel even more connected to the problem by agitating and then solving. The agitating part is like the frame or the context. Of course, plenty of time, whether or not somebody wants something or whether they'll take action that moment depends on the whole context of the situation. And so this is where you're going to spend a lot of your time, is on the frame and the context once you hit these things properly. But this is the entire framework. So now it's just a matter of understanding this more. And there's plenty of work for you to do. I'm not giving you probably ever many templates here in this training place. Mike actually gives you a fairly large number of templates and examples throughout his training in both the monetization and in the conversion section of Project X. But it's a wonderful feeling to feel like the work that you're doing is taking you in the right direction, and to feel like you're gaining understanding. This also will mean that you have a plan, a generalized plan, which will allow you to improve. Often people will do conversion attempts, but they really won't get better because they don't really have a centralized plan or framework that they can use as a kernel to grow from. So with this framework, this will allow you to improve in a different way from now on. All right, so now let's take a look at each of these individual things in a separate slide with some details. Okay, so regarding the first item of the 4, the correct benefit solution must be immediately clear, right? I wrote a bunch of stuff here as notes to myself and for you, so I'm just going to read this first. You want to get not just in the prospect's shoes, but conceptually speaking, you want to get inside their entire body, their friends' bodies, on their forums, on their Facebook groups, or maybe Quora, which is a place where people ask questions and get answers, solutions to problems and so forth. It's a website. You want to, and then not just get in their body, not just get there, but walk conceptually speaking through their day. And sometimes you'll actually talk to people. And so you'll walk their day by them just talking to you. And not just their day, but maybe their year or that week or month, depending on the situation. And then when you're doing that, when you're walking through their day, don't just look forward, look around you and see what's going on to your right and to your left, so to speak. And then don't stop with one type of archetype of a prospect or one even actual example of a prospect, then do it with different types of people. Now, in one manner of speaking, I could have talked about this in the final thing about the frame, but really, no, I'm trying in one sense, it's a simple idea to say the correct benefit or solution must be immediately clear, but you really want to understand the problem, the solution that they're looking for, the prospect is looking for, how they're going to recognize it and so forth. This will a little help you with a couple of the other parts of the framework too. If you do this, then you'll be better able to see how to stand out alone to them. You notice like what would stand out to them, what wouldn't, if you're going to need to stand out. Again, sometimes you're just automatically standing alone. So I wanted to point out with that terminology of standing alone that you don't need to stand out. But if you do, then this process will help you see how to stand out to them and also see what would cause this person to dismiss something as incompetent or not what they're looking for. So this is a little bit of advice for the whole situation. But including, this is mainly the way to figure out what the issue is. If let's say you have a website where you're an affiliate with Regal Assets, then we have pretty exclusive agreement with, and you're selling gold, like people that are literally looking to buy physical gold, have it shipped to their house. If you help bring a lead to Regal Assets and that person buys gold, then you get a substantial amount of money for that. So if that's the case, though, if you're doing that, if you have a website where someone types in gold IRA or where should I buy gold, if they type that into Google and your website comes up, then you have to figure out what is the benefit that they're looking for. If you're just like, hey, Regal's great or buy gold here, that isn't, maybe the benefit they're looking for isn't to be able to buy gold. Maybe they already get the fact that they want to buy gold, but what they're looking for, their problem is they want to find the cheapest place to buy gold as long as it's trustworthy. They want to find some optimal combination of trust and cheapness, because one way or the other, they're going to get gold, right? Unless they get swindled, they're going to get the same gold at the end. If they're the person's trustworthy, still want to get it as cheaply as possible. So then by getting on their forums and by thinking through what's really going on, if you were going to buy gold, you would probably realize that. So you would know what benefit to say. Same thing in my niche with omgmachines.com. I need to know what solution people are looking for. And generally, what you were looking for probably had something to do with you wanted some training and probably some personal access to somebody who was currently making a lot of money online. And then you also wanted that to be particularly duplicatable. And what Greg does is particularly duplicatable because it's search engine optimization based. Whereas what I do to make money online is a little bit less duplicatable. It's a little bit more esoteric or abstract. So I don't put myself front and center and say, even though I make a very large amount of money, I don't put myself out there because it's much harder to connect the dots between that you can learn from me and when I'm making a sale, right? When I'm converting. At this point, now that you're inside, I'll help you as well as Greg will help you. But I don't try to make the sale based on me. It's a lot easier to do. Even on Mike, we don't try to do it that much. We mainly do it on Greg because it's much more clear to people, as well it should be. That's why we have Greg. That's why I think search engine optimization genuinely is the way to go for certain. If you're getting started or haven't yet had success online or want to expand your success, it's such a great place to be. Very reliable and just there's not really a lot of risk or startup cost and so forth. It's reliable if you have Greg, I would say. So again, the benefit or solution needs to be clear. And the final thing I wrote, so you want to know your prospect very well. And then you also want to know your product very well from as many angles as reasonably possible. If you're doing affiliate marketing, as a lot of you want to, then you want to know the end product that you're promoting. Of course, you want to know the prospects well, but then you want to know the product that you're promoting as well as possible and from as many different angles. Okay, I'll move along so I can continue to just give you the framework in this video and not get too deep. All right, a little more random font sizes here. We get bigger, smaller, and so forth. So the next thing was in a way that stands alone. And I pointed out a little bit of this already, but you can be alone in space if you're the only person in your particular little place that you're in. You can be alone in time where you're the only type of offer they're seeing in a time frame that kind of makes sense in that niche. If it's movies, if you're separated by a week from another blockbuster, if you're receiving an affiliate promotion, then hopefully they haven't been promoting anything else for a week or so before you. And if you're looking to convert a local business so you can do SEO work for them, if they haven't been approached very recently by someone of your type, then that's helpful. Then from that, or to supplement that, then if there's some aspect where you have a higher quality, but it only has to be in one clear way, right? It doesn't have to be that you're generally higher quality, right? You just want to be higher quality in a clear way for people, and then just be competent and kind of a reasonable level, a worst case of 4, ideally at least like a 6 or so on a scale of 1 to 10 in other areas. In essence, I do this with you in these videos. I don't go for a super amazing looking presentation, right? I also don't do a picture-in-picture live thing of myself but what you have, you can read it, right? It's okay. It doesn't detract from the presentation that I just use a pretty simple PowerPoint situation. And you can hear my audio clearly. You can see the words clearly. And then I try to stand out with the quality and thoroughness and correctness of the ideas that I share with. So that would be an example from this. If you're just quite unique, if you come up with something that people haven't seen before, now the drawback to that is that they are less likely to know that they want it. But sometimes you can come up with a unique solution to a problem that people know that they want. And it might be a little less clear for them to connect the dots again between the solving the problem and this unique thing they haven't seen. But sometimes that can work fine for you to be unique. But I want you to also see that you don't need this. By listing all these different ways to stand alone, even if you've heard all of these things, what I'm pointing out is you really only need one. You just need to stand alone in some way, not in 4 or 5 ways. And weirdly enough, if you try to stand alone in too many ways, it can backfire on you. Mostly by eating up too much of your resources that you could have spent on making sure everything else was at least a 6, right? You'd rather take a 3 up to a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10 in some other area of what's going on with your business than you take a 6 up to a 9. And you could also be using the time that you're spending trying to have more than one of these things on working on your framing and context, which is very important. So just pick one. Another way that you can stand out that we do with OMG machines is with the level of we don't even have really testimonials we have a little bit of that. We have success reports or earnings reports where people are actually testifying to exact numbers they've made and they continue to make. And then you even update those with making even more money. And that's very powerful. And that's real. That probably, not probably, but there was a reasonable chance that's what made us stand alone to you when you were looking for something to do. We had the original thing where there was a clear benefit, like we made sense to you, but then we also stood out probably in the sheer number and quality of our earnings reports. And then we have our sales letter right on this blog page that has not just comments, but Facebook comments, which are particularly hard to fake, right? And people that reach out to those folks sometimes, they don't get inundated, the people that put Facebook comments and all. So please put one yourself. But prospects do their homework, right? And we charge a significant amount for our coaching. And so I would say that's the way that we try to stand alone. And so I don't try to do it in a lot of other categories, right? We do offer proof. A lot of the other stuff ends up being more like context and framing. Rather, we win off of our demonstration of proof. Our proof. Demonstration would be something, and we did this actually early on with OMG machines before we had earnings reports. Then what we used was we could demonstrate rankings. We still do that, but we really focused in on making that the way that we stood alone early on, where Greg just ranked for so many sites and we showed just so many. We probably showed less to you less just sheer number of rankings when you saw us. When in the presentation or webinar that you saw that to decide to hop into Project X, than we did a year ago. That we would show maybe 20 websites a year ago because demonstration was how we would stand alone. Now we have the earnings reports, we have a different way. And again, instead of putting effort into demonstrating so much that way, we put effort in other places that'll help in better ways, more efficient ways for us, including, of course, just delivering the product itself rather than having to focus so strongly on our sales. We can put more effort into the product, which then it creates a nice upward spiral with our earnings reports because we have so much focus to put into your success after you join us that, of course, by putting more focus in, we're going to get more success from our members and they give us more earnings reports. And so we continue standing alone in this particular way. So it's a great place to move to is to success reports appropriate to your niche. Of course, they won't always be earnings reports depending on what you're doing. Even if you're an affiliate marketer, you should realize that you can do that. You can actually get testimonials from people that buy the end product if you have a way to have some contact with the people. And you can even somehow help them consume and succeed with the end product, even if it's a manufactured product. You could have a way to, with people, again, your prospects, your people that end up buying based on your affiliate interventions. You have a website taking people over to a final sales page of someone else's. Again, you can find a way to interact, help them consume, help them succeed with the product, and then actually get testimonials for yourself as an affiliate for that product, but that you get to take advantage of that are only for you. And other affiliates that you're quote unquote competing with won't have that type of proof. And then you can say, hey, if you buy through me, then you'll also get to have me there with you, helping you with this. And look what's happened to other people who've done that sort of thing. So that can help you with your affiliate market. A silver bullet is basically just another word for the stuff that I've already been talking about. Some little particular unique thing about your offer that's really impressive to people. Sometimes people say, this is all you need to convert. This is the secret to conversion. That's why it's so important that you have this video and this framework, because then you're not going to run off just getting all obsessed with one detail of conversion. You'll see how details fit in with the framework. What a silver bullet's going to do for you is take care of the second of the 4 parts of the framework, and you only need one. So if you have some other thing that lets you stand alone, you don't even really need a silver bullet, believe it or not. A braingasm is just another example of the type of thing. One thing you can have is a sales letter. You could have no proof, none of these other things. But if you, in a sales letter or sales video, can give someone a realization or help them see something in a way they had never seen before that feels useful to them, and they're like, wow, I never thought of it that way, and I like that. That's really cool. I learned something. Then you've done a braingasm, helping them have a braingasm, and that can be your USP. That might be why they buy. In terms of this aspect of the framework, you still need the other parts of the framework, but you only have to fulfill this in one way, and that can be your way if you don't have the other ones. This is a little bit of a last resort, but it certainly can be effective, and people often use it. But again, let me point out, you don't need this. Sometimes people think, okay, I need proof, I need demonstration, I need to be unique, I need a silver bullet, I need to have more quality, and I also need a braingasm. You don't. Basically, you just need one. Okay, moving on to the next slide. The third of the 4 parts of the framework. You don't want to appear or imply ever that you're incompetent. Check your links. You can screw up once in a while, but try not. But it's better never to, because the more you check and make sure you don't screw up, the more you have leeway if you ever do. So don't spend your get out of jail free cards whenever you don't have to, and don't not check, and don't spend them by not checking. Something might come up where you appear incompetent. Anyway, our server didn't go down, but the entire major hosting company that has millions of websites served on them went down just yesterday for a couple of hours. Ideally, the good thing is we don't look at generally incompetent in other ways. And generally, if that happens, people our members aren't already upset with us or feeling like we stink. And then that's like the last straw, or they get upset about that kind of thing. Generally, they just figure that probably most people assume that it was just an issue with the hosting company and not with us. So my point in that is that things will come up outside of your control. Save that for when you want to have a couple of get out of jail free cards, and don't try to not only not be incompetent, but check. And incompetence can be an appearance. Now, think about just how you dress. You don't need to dress fashionably in order to not be incompetent. You can just fit in with the crowd, and that can be fine. Remember, in the second part of the framework, this is the third. The second part was where you want to stand alone in some way. You only have to do that once, not over and over again. As a matter of fact, if you try to stand out, and now in this case, I did mean to say stand out, not stand alone. If you try to stand out in too many ways, it can actually backfire on you, because this is the law of implication, right? The implication of trying to stand out is that in more than one way is that you're covering up for something. What are you compensating for? You just need to dress your website, so to speak, in a competent manner. That might mean different things in different niches. And it could be a little better to look a little bit more, and try go more for like crisp and clean than like super graphical and so on and so forth. If that's really your thing, that can try to be your way to stand out. But it's not that strong a way to stand out as to be super like graphical with your website in most cases. And then again, people can wonder what you're compensating for if it's not your main way to stand out. But don't look, okay, and this relates to what I wrote here in parentheses. Plain doesn't mean ugly with your website. You can have a fairly plain looking website that converts fine. We're a little bit fancy here at OMG Machines. We got some little cartoony graphics, but they help with the frame. You can definitely use your look and feel as part of the framing and context I'm talking about next time. And we try to do that a bit at OMG Machines. It's probably not all that important for us to do or whatever, but we did it. Or we didn't spend too much on it or whatever. And it's nice to just have framing things here and there. But worst case, it's better to be plain by far than to be ugly on your website. Okay, so you don't want to appear incompetent in any way. Depending on your ability to write in a good fashion, proofread, maybe even, I don't know, even read some books. Just if you read a little bit, you can just get more competent writing and recognizing good writing. So literally just if you find yourself where you're making websites and affiliate websites and writing some sales copy, then literally just reading some novels and such, then can just help you recognizing what reasonable grammar writing looks like, even if it's a not a great classic novel, still it's probably competent writing in most cases. You might say, "Oh, come on, most of the stuff to me isn't competent." It's competent in the way that where it's not sounding just, and it might not be, but in a lot of cases it'll be competent in the sense of just the writing at least flows reasonably, the grammar's there. It's not one way to be competent when you're writing is to have short sentences that aren't just too long. So keep it short, keep your sentences short, your paragraphs short. And you don't need to keep your whole website short, but keeping sentences and paragraphs short is a nice little shortcut. And then just proofread more and more, or get someone else to help proofread if that's what you need, depending on your education level or your general ability to write in English. Because you can do everything else right, but if your writing looks like you're incompetent, then that could just take you out. A lot of these things in this part of the framework, this third part of the framework, you could just do everything else right and just make no sales if you're taking yourself out. And it's interesting because, again, but because that's the case, people can get the wrong idea with conversion, or you can have so much knowledge about conversion. You can be so close to doing so well. You can be right about to cross the finish line with making a lot of money. And this might be all that's holding you back. And that's great. And you might just be ready to give up. And all you need to do is go through and remove all the things that would be disqualifying you. And you might just be fine. Interestingly enough, I have an attitude towards conversion that's very helpful. It's constantly useful. And that kind of proves it to be true in this case, because its only purpose is to be useful. Is that I have this attitude that essentially a sales process either converts or it doesn't. Many people have the attitude that that is more of a continuum of little incremental improvements when it comes to conversion or something like that. It's not that's true or false, but they miss this important truth. I don't really ask how well something converts so much as just does it convert? Because the other thing is, because I can convert, if I have something that makes sales in the first place, then I can do the rest. If it's something I myself created, then I can continue to improve it if I need to, or improve on the whole context and situation so that it makes even more sales. But it's really just a case of it isn't making anything more than like an absurdly low number of sales or not. And if it is making an absurdly low number of sales, then you just check to the framework. The first thing that could be totally blocking you is if you're not clear about what the heck you're selling, okay, what your solution is, what the benefit is. The second thing is if you don't stand out in any way. The third thing is if you're disqualifying yourself. And interestingly enough, like the fourth thing that we'll get to isn't really going to prevent you from converting. That's more where you can get better and better. It's your opportunity to improve your results. But really, if you hit these first three parts of the framework, you're actually going to convert. I've really, believe it or not, I've just never failed. For 20 years, I've just made money every time I try to do something and I put any kind of focus on it whatsoever. I did before that with some network marketing. Actually, even during those 20 years, I did a little bit of attempts at network marketing before the internet. And prior to teaching the accelerated learning, right before the last 20 years, I tried doing some door-to-door selling over the summer with something called Southwestern, where they get college students to go some other place and do this door-to-door selling of these study guides. I failed at that. I didn't do well. It felt to me like there was nobody home. I don't know whether that was correct or not. They kept telling me that if you thought that no one was home, it was all in your head. But I just felt quite strongly, it seemed to me that it wasn't in my head, that just people weren't there. So I really didn't actually sold the stuff okay when people were home, but they just were hardly home. But since I started with accelerated learning and excluding a bit of a foray into trying to do some network marketing is not online, right? It's like I was trying with a company called Free Life. There's plenty of that network marketing companies, like Amway is the biggest one. But online, I've never had a problem. And then with accelerated learning, actually with accelerated learning, I had a couple of years early on where I fell flat, or semesters, particularly in the spring, which is the second semester. I fell flat, which helped me learn a lot of lessons because I needed to do it in order to eat and pay rent. So it forced me to learn how to convert for sure. But then overall, I was successful. And online, I basically always made money from the beginning because I'd already learned my lesson for 10 years. I'd been doing my teaching both by putting up flyers and by doing sales presentations that the flyers would get people to. They were called information sessions. That's a good example of framing and the fourth part of the framework, right? You call it information sessions better than calling it a sales session, especially on a college campus. It kind of speaks in their language. But I would just get so much feedback. And then, of course, my students themselves they'd be there with me week after week for 5 weeks or 8 weeks. And so I also learned how to get actual results from people that were learning, which is something that a lot of people don't have that experience of. Often people will sell a book or sell a course. They'll never see whether people are using it or succeeding. But I had to have people coming back week after week. And if they didn't succeed, that they'd be right there in front of me telling me they didn't succeed. And I couldn't escape it. So I had to make it work. All right. I meandered a little bit perhaps into discussing things, but hopefully that was helpful, and I'll continue on. If people feel like you don't care, that could disqualify you. Inspecting means there's a phrase that's pretty helpful. People respect what you inspect. For example, if you're an affiliate and you do webinars, or affiliates that do webinars for us, if people just do multiple webinars, or at least particularly if they've looked at the product carefully, and their prospects can tell whether the affiliate is taking things seriously or not. And that's a very important factor in whether they buy. They want to know, is the affiliate serious? If the affiliate's not serious, and they figure, why take the offer seriously? So that kind of disqualifies the whole promotion. So inspect something. I talked a little bit about this when I said look at the product from multiple angles. Again, if you come across like you don't care or respect the product, and you show respect by inspecting the product, then that can just disqualify you from making a sale. If you don't respect your own product, if you're an affiliate, you don't respect it. If you're trying to get local clients, but you don't seem to respect yourself or really know what you're saying, if you haven't prepared, then that can disqualify you. Not showing up. For example, if an affiliate does a webinar and they don't come on the webinar, but you can metaphorically, if you're doing an affiliate promo and you don't really show up properly, if they don't really get to contact with you, right? At some point, they should probably be seeing you on a video of some sort, or at least it can be a picture of you and you talking to them personally. But if you're talking impersonally to them, you don't need a picture, although it's got to be helpful. A picture of you as a person, like people sell and draw attention, like pictures of actual faces draw attention better, and they make us feel more of a feeling of connection. So the more you show up, the more when you write about your little sales thing I say sales thing because you might be getting people over to another sales letter, but you can call it a matchmaker page, whenever an affiliate promotion might be. The more you show up, the better. And basically, if you don't show up, then that can just fully disqualify you. Incongruence means, this is definitely a word, interestingly enough. However, it's funny, the spell checker on this didn't pick it up, didn't have that already inside of it. Incongruence means that what you are thinking and feeling is conflicted. Doesn't really match what you seem to be saying. So if you're saying buy this product and you don't really believe in it, or you're thinking, I want to make the sale while you're telling them to buy, that's actually incongruent. You want to be feeling like you want to take the same action that you want your prospect or your prospective customer to take. That action is to buy your product. You can see this as in a kind of a funny way with dating. If a guy, let's say, is thinking that he wants to have sex with a girl, that's actually incongruent with if he wants her to have sex with him. He basically, you can finish the sentence, or I'll just go ahead and finish it so I'm clear, because I want you to understand this concept. But basically, he needs to imagine being the girl and wanting to have sex with him, right? Or himself. It's not exactly that he should want to imagine having sex with himself, but he needs to imagine essentially being her buying the product, which is having sex with him. So thinking that he focused in his mind on wanting to have sex with her is actually incongruent with the sale that he wants to make, which is for her to have sex with him. So keep that strongly in mind. You want to be careful about that mistake. It's easy to make, where you're thinking of making the sale while you're telling them to buy. So you have to really feel like you want to buy. And Mike is great at this. Mike really feels like he wants to buy Project X, or what he's selling for good reason. And Mike, by the way, is very congruent. He's my closest friend. I know him. I talk to him for over an hour a day, often like 2 hours a day. What he says, he lives it. If you could hear us talking behind the scenes about either sales or how to improve the product or your individual successes, or how to help people become more successful, you'd like us. You would like it. For example, we don't refer, when we're talking just among ourselves, we very naturally don't refer to people that join even our email list or anything as leads. We refer to them as people. And that's not just like a credo. It's not like we just decided to do that one day. It's also natural for us. We see people as people. We don't see them as numbers. And so then we're more congruent. It's more true, by the way. The great way to be congruent is just to see things accurately and then be selling something that's of reasonable quality and so forth. So but that's how we think and act. We think of people as, this is a little bit, it might not sound like too big of a difference, but I refer to people as members, not customers. That relates to the whole shallow idea of sales. Is when we want people to be successful, it's an ongoing process. A member is a more long-term thing. A customer is someone who performed one action once, right? Or like a transaction. Whereas a member is like a more ongoing, permanent type thing. And so if you're incongruent, that's bad. If you're generally unlikable or timid, then that can disqualify you. So that can give you a little bit of an overview, and you can think some more about that. I need to move on here. The sake of time, even though I guess I had infinite time, but at this point, I try to keep videos usually a half an hour, 40 minutes. We're already at 52, but let's continue on to framing. Okay. Try to speak quickly here and just do quite an overview the best I can. Anchoring, priming, and triggers is the first thing I wrote. Now, I talked about testimonials before. Testimonials can be, and they are for us, like our kind of way to stand alone. They can also, if they're not your way to particularly stand out, they can just be something that's more on the periphery, is more of a frame or a context that helps you. All right, let me give you a study. It was pretty fascinating. Let's say you, and I'm saying let's say you, but this is actually done. So they gave, and it was duplicated. They gave college students this is a psychological test, right? A psychological experiment. They always, whenever they do psychological experiments, particularly on college students, they always tell them that the experiment is something other than what it really is. And so in this case, they tell them that they're trying to take a jumble of 5 words and come up with a sentence of at least 4 words out of those. And for half the kids, they just gave random words. And for half the kids, they gave words that had a lot of words associated with the elderly, like Florida or arthritis or wrinkles and that sort of thing. And the students who had word jumbles that included these words associated with the elderly, then they told the kids to walk down the hall to the second part of the experiment. But the real experiment was how long it took the kids to walk down the hall. And the kids that had the words that were associated with the elderly walked down the hall significantly at about 70% of the speed of the students that didn't have the word jumbles with words associated with the elderly. So it had a very measurable impact on their walking speed. And that's called priming. Now, sometimes gurus talking about conversion will just compile a bunch of little clever things that have to do with sort of psychological anomalies or tricks, or even, I don't even want to call them tricks, illusions. And these things, I find the field of cognitive illusions to be fascinating. There's a great book that I'm reading now called Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I'll just write it here. Okay, I wrote it here. Thinking Fast and Slow is the name of the book by Daniel Kahneman. The program is telling me this is spelled wrong. And there's a whole number of books on cognitive illusions that you can look at, and you'll learn more of these things. That book, Robert Cialdini's Influence, will have these things. And so often gurus will just compile a bunch of random stuff like this and give it to you and tell you, hey, these are the keys to conversion. It gets a little complicated trying to keep too many of these in mind, but they're really fun to read about. And as you get used to using more of them, it's helpful. It's definitely useful. There are pretty much 2 things that I always do, and that have to do with cognitive illusions. One involves triggers. Because another experiment that's been duplicated in lots of different ways over and over again is that if you give someone a number in a way that is totally unrelated to the next thing, and then you ask them like how much the money they'll pay for something, or even ask them to estimate the number of jelly beans in it. If you say to someone, there's 10 million or 10, I don't know how many, 10 billion, 10 million, I don't know, fish in the sea. And then you say how many jelly beans are in that jar. And you tell another person and you take another group, you don't anchor a higher number first. Sorry, I said trigger. I should have said anchor. If you don't give them a number, then the number of jelly beans that they estimate will be lower and significantly. And same thing with purchasing. I will always, unless I'm really not trying to make a sale once in a while. With the law of implication order page itself, I actually did do that a little bit on purpose. I just wasn't using any sales process at first, just to have people in there that particularly knew that they wanted it as the only people. And it's actually still that way, I believe. I might have put something in there since, but I will always say a higher number before I give the price. And it doesn't even have to be a number associated with the product or the price point. It could just be a number that has nothing to do with that, although usually I'll just do it in context with numbers of prices. What you don't need to do is say like BS, like this usually sells for $99, but today you can get it for $69. When in fact, every day you can get it for $69. I don't do that. That's incongruent. And the trouble with that is it'll make you some sales, but it can just take you out if you get caught. And I don't find it to be worth it. And also it can reduce trust in you and reduce customer success later down the road. And so I'm not just trying to make the sale. I'm trying to have a conversion where the customer is both successful, and if I have more quality items that are good for them, that they'll buy those as well. It's funny, sometimes people talk about calculating lifetime customer value, and then people can use that the idea is you can use that to figure out how much you can pay for a lead. Not a person, of course, a lead. But that makes no sense because your life, how could you possibly calculate your average lifetime customer value? Like at OMG machines, if we try to do that, then just ask me next year and it'll be a lot more, the average. So it doesn't make any sense if arbitrarily cut the time period off right now, whereas our folks will buy stuff for years to come, the same folks. Throughout 2013, for probably about 8 months of 2013, we hardly focused at all on getting new leads and therefore didn't get a whole lot of new leads, of course, new people on our list. And we just kept on making sales of our own products. So certainly some affiliate things too, but mostly of our own stuff to people with just making tons and tons of sales without new people, just because our existing people were coming up with quality things that people were going to benefit from. And then people would purchase. And my point there is lifetime customer value doesn't make any sense. If you asked us what it was in June, then it would be a smaller number than what it was in November. So lifetime customer value calculation presumes that you're no longer, that the customers or members or whoever, people die out on your list after a certain point always. And that doesn't happen with us. So we don't really have a concept of how much that might be. It's high enough that we can basically pay anything for new people and it'll be worth it, although we don't have to really pay for it in the first place. We have other ways to get new folks. All right. So the one thing I do that I was telling you is the anchoring of the higher number. I always do that. That's simple to remember, and it absolutely has an effect. So always do that, whether you're talking about getting a local client consulting job or whatever position or client. And then if you're making an affiliate sale, if you're selling your own product, always do this. Next, always understand the following. All right. I believe this is in a book called Inevitable Illusions by an Italian author, although it's in English. I think it was originally written in English. It might not have been. It might have originally been written in Italian and then translated. Regardless, it's called Inevitable Illusion. I believe it's in that book. I don't have that book on hand right now. It got accidentally loaned out into the nether. But I'm very clear I might get some details wrong, but I'm very clear on the concept. Essentially, an experiment was done and duplicated where they asked people, what's the likelihood that it was either that we'll invade China or China will invade us in the next, 20 years or some such. And when you first saw this, you might have thought I was going to talk about invading China. I'm not. This is just a psychological experiment. And people put some percentage, just fairly low, right? But it was whatever percentage it was. Let's suppose they said the chance was like, I don't know, 0.5% or 1% or 3%. Then what they did, it doesn't matter what the actual number was. Then what they did is they gave a different group of people a scenario that involved 7 steps that each was a little bit easy there was a smaller step and a little bit than the whole full scale invasion, and kind of easy to imagine. It's at least plausible. Like maybe we have an issue, I don't know, with currency, trade tariff wars. And then I'm just making this up, but I'm just giving you a sense of what they did. Right. And then, or maybe there's something with Taiwan and then that escalates and so forth. And so they had 7 specific steps leading up to one of us invading the other, us invading China or them invading us. And so the end step was identical to what they asked the first group, what the percentage of that was. The fascinating thing is when asked what the likelihood of all 7 of those steps. So they weren't just asked the likelihood of the final step, and they weren't asked the likelihood of one of the steps happening. They were asked, what's the likelihood that all 7 of those steps will happen in that way? And the likelihood that people gave was significantly higher than the likelihood that a different group gave of just the one event. Now, it's logically necessarily true that the probability of 7 specific events happening in order is wildly lower than just one final event, right? And yet, based on how our brains process information, will reliably get things wrong in certain cases. And in this case, they were tricked, right? The brain was tricked, and it came to the conclusion that it was far more likely that all 7 steps. So that had to be wrong, right? It can't possibly be right. It doesn't matter what the actual likelihood of China or whatever the invasion of China with China happening was. We know that it couldn't be the case that it would be more likely that for 7 events. It should be wildly less likely. And yet it was way more likely that people judged all 7 events to happen. So that's fascinating And now the problem that I have in conversion, hopefully you'll have in conversion, is helping people to see the truth. That's my whole issue with my whole thing in life now is getting people, including you, by the way. I hope that at this point you'll just take my word, not make me. I will, of course, do a whole sales process at some point for law of conversion once I'm done creating it. But hopefully you won't wait for that. You'll benefit now and just freaking get it. It's not $1 billion. It's not $1,000. It's less than 100. It's $99 to get. And so please just go ahead and get that. There's a link for we'll probably watching this video over to the order page if you want. Plus there's 2 more videos where I explain the whole law of implication much better. Do that just based on my word, please. Right? You should trust me enough at this point just to go do that. I'm not trying to get more money out of you. All right. I'm trying to make the world perfect or at least you can say greatly improve it at this point with the law of implication, getting the word out there. It's going to incredibly help you next year to have the entire thing. Anyway, so hopefully when you are doing conversion, you are helping to see people to see something that's correct. When I'm trying to convert for the law of implication at some point, then I'm trying to help people see the truth, which is that it's worth $1 billion if they had it, not just 99, that it's the best thing they can get, period, in the case of law of implication. In the case of selling other products, it isn't necessarily the best thing they can get, but if it's the truth that it would help them, then you want them to see that. And by the way, part of that is showing them genuinely, not just as a trick to wink and everyone to buy, who it's not good for. And not even just as a sales mechanism, but it'll actually tend to help you sell if you genuinely say who it's not good for. But that's part of congruence and the frame and so forth, where it'll make you more trustworthy if you actually behave in a trustworthy manner. Then people will perceive you as more trustworthy. Go figure. So this invading China thing, you can use it to trick people, but in essence, one thing we do is we use this in our earnings reports is we take people, when people are naturally skeptical of testimonials, right? Or earnings reports. Now at the point where you have a person on video and with as strict as the Federal Trade Commission is now, they're pretty trustworthy to begin with, these earnings reports. But what we do to make them both trustworthy and also just have more emotional impact and make more sense is we walk the person who's giving the earnings report, the testimonial, whatever, through them explaining step by step, starting from before they had the product and so forth, and get a little bit, we might not go through every step, but Mike really is great. And Mike really understands as well. And by leading people through steps, then the bottom line here, it's pretty simple, right? It all feels much more believable to somebody if you give them a progression of events or a progression of logic or whatever, connect the dots and so forth. And of course, it's common sense in a sense, but it's fascinating to hear how powerful effect it is on the brain to just be taken through steps, each of which is plausible. And then it just, again, the experiment with this shows that it has even much more impact than we would even think. Because of course, people should have a number that people would normally, whatever the average number is for what people think that the likelihood of the invasion with China happening, it should have been 1/millionth of the probability of that, of all 7 events happening, or 1/billionth or whatever. And instead it was more likely in people's minds. So it's so powerful if you just take people through plausible steps. So I always do this based on this kind of cognitive illusion idea, and I always do the anchoring. And then you can read stuff like this. You can read anything you want on cognitive illusions. You can read Robert Cialdini's influence, and you can gain more of an understanding of priming, like I talk about. Triggers are like anything where there's like a stimulus and then someone feels a memory or association to something else or an emotional trigger. Then of course, it's all the same type of thing. And then finally, I basically covered this already, that you want to, I mentioned this before, right? When I was talking about taking yourself out in congruence. So another part of the frame, and I can go on and on for videos, and I very well might, at least for one more video, on talking about frame and context. As a general strategy in life, paying much more attention to your peripheral context of whatever is going on with a goal, or in this case, sales, than you normally do, will tend to be very helpful for you. Sun Tzu's Art of War, right? The famous ancient book, is, if you look at each of his chapters or suggestions or strategies, pieces of advice, they all have to do with paying more attention to context. People tend to just see, or our brains operate in a way where they tend to put much more weight on the thing that's like in the middle, like the immediate context rather than the peripheral context. and you'll be better at strategy and achieving your goals and so forth if you pay a lot more attention to context than comes naturally, than it's intuitive at first. So pay attention to your own mental state. You want to work yourself into sort of a buying frenzy for the product itself, not into a selling frenzy, but into a buying frenzy. And again, you just want to generally be congruent in as many ways as you can, where you're aware of the product, where you can see how it helps people. And if you're scared of getting feedback from people that buy the product, or if you have no way to get feedback, that's going to lead to some degree of incongruence, and that will detract from your sales ultimately. It won't necessarily fully take you out or not, depending, but take you out means screw you up, keep you from making sales. But it'll help your context if you get feedback from people that are buying and find out that they're being successful. And if you're cutting yourself off from feedback, then because you're worried about what the feedback might be, then you're implying to your own brain something incongruent that'll mess with you, which is that you're afraid of the people buying and that you believe that maybe people aren't being successful. If you're scared of feedback, scared of hearing from customers after they buy, that it must be the case that to some degree you're afraid that they're not being successful. And that is going to affect your congruence in your mental state and your ability to sell. It'll affect the frame and the context and so forth. So there you go. There's your overview. And now you forever have the correct framework for doing conversion. And it's now just a matter for the rest of your life of filling in details, competence, gaining experience, and so forth. But you'll always be working within the right framework now from now on, as long as you might want to review this video more than once, take some notes, and so forth. But it's all right there for you.